more. It's really a knowledge clinic on how SADC Groundwater Management Institute is trying to improve groundwater governance. We are joined by the Executive Director of SADC Groundwater Management Institute, Engineer James Sarawamba. We are joined by 3 countries today, Malawi, South Africa, and Tanzania, as well as a water governance and finance expert, Belinda Petrie from OneWorld. I will not spend too much time. I think we all appreciate that groundwater is of critical importance. The management, the sustainable management and use of groundwater, conjunctive use of groundwater, critical, especially in our times of growing water scarcity. So without much further ado, I will invite Engineer James Sarawamba, who's going to give us that regional, as this is for the SADC, the Southern African Development Community, regional perspective on groundwater. Engineer Sarawamba, you're most welcome. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. I will do a quick rundown of our model as SADC-GMI and for the SADC region in terms of implementing institutional arrangements for the sustainable development and management of groundwater resources. I'll present here on behalf of SADC-GMI, a Center of Excellence for Groundwater Development and Management in the SADC region, which is also the niche institution for groundwater in our region. Next slide. So I will do a very quick rundown of this is just demonstrating the policy, legal, and institutional framework in our region, which shows that there is subsidiary policies, structures, and institutions and strategies for the governance of the resource that is cascading from the regional level. Those are the key instruments we have in our region for that purpose. We have a regional water policy, a water strategy, a protocol, and the regional strategic action plans that inform the policies and guide the implementation at national level. Next slide. In the next slide, I demonstrate a very important entry point and for closing the gaps in the governance of this resource, what we call the 7 I's. And I've highlighted the institutions because we are going to be talking of the institutions, but there are 6 others that include inclusivity, innovation, integration, investments, information, and infrastructure. Next slide. In the next slide, I show where SADC-GMI sits in green there, and the whole institutional arrangements in our region to facilitate the integrated management of groundwater, not as an isolated resource, but in conjunction with surface water. Those are institutions at local level, going up to the mezzanine floor, all the way up to the regional level. Next slide. This is a bit more of the institutional framework at regional level, showing how SADC-GMI in green with a board of directors is linked up to the SADC Secretariat. It is also linked up to the SADC structures, the member states. I think of very importance here, of significant importance, is the Subcommittee on Hydrogeology and national focal groups. Our entry point into each one of the member states is a national focal person who is also a member of the Subcommittee on Hydrogeology, what we call the national focal points. And from this, we talk of a structure called the national focal groups that I'll discuss moving forward. Next slide. So just to emphasize our mandate and how it brings us to the stage where we have to support the member states. We have a mandate to provide technical support across the region to create an enabling policy, legal, and institutional framework, to provide evidence-based actionable information, and to provide capacity building to the different institutions. And this is about capacity at all levels, starting from local all the way to the regional level. I'll talk to the structures a bit more later. Also leading and promoting multi-sectoral coordination and supporting the development of infrastructure for the protection and for the utilization of groundwater. Next slide. Just to show you a bit more, we have got the institutions. So within the institutions, we've got the national focal groups that I've indicated as NFGs there. We have instruments, we develop guidelines, frameworks, and policies that guide the development and implementation of groundwater. We have infrastructure and we have information where we convert data into information for the sustainable development and management of groundwater resources sustainably. We move on. So we therefore have this project to establish national focal groups whose core objectives are four. The first one is to improve and enhance institutional capacity in SADC member states and expand interest for groundwater to influence decision-making towards groundwater investments within the region, to ensure the actionable groundwater management, development and use is adopted in the member states, and to provide technical support and advice to the groundwater national focal point person. As I said, we enter each country through a national focal point person who is sitting in the ministry, department, or agency responsible for groundwater in that country. So these national focal persons are surrounded by a national focal group whose membership is a minimum of 5 members. These are institutions, one of whom, of course, will chair. And then we have members that shall represent different organizations from government, from academic, from the research institutions, private sector, the NGO sector, community-based organizations, and service suppliers and main user sectors. So this is more like representation from this type of sectoral institutions. Next slide. So with this establishment of national focal groups, we've had 2 phases. The first phase was between 2018 and 2020. We established national focal groups in 5 countries: Eswatini, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. And in the current phase, we started in 2022, where we have established 5 additional national focal groups, where we have Lesotho instead of Mauritius. It's DRC actually. Tanzania, South Africa, and Zambia. Next slide. So that is basically an overview, more like a teaser of our strategy to establish national focal groups in the region. I thank you. Over to you, Ruth.
Thank you so much, James, and for that teaser. I loved your overview of the SADC groundwater governance model at the regional level, and then of course SADC 16 countries, and then we also have some shared aquifers and some shared river basins. So we have the basin level, and then of course the national level. So what we have 3 members from the countries with us today. And I am really just going to interact very briefly with them to learn from them how, James, it's very, very good that James has shared this lovely, innovative governance model, but let's see how it's transpired at country level. So we have Malawi, South Africa, and Tanzania on the panel with us. If you listen carefully to James, he mentioned that there are these national focal groups that we're going to be showcasing. These are national groundwater stakeholder platforms, and government has a critical role in these platforms, the mandated institution. So these are the national focal persons that James referred to in his presentation, and we're going to start with Malawi. So Madam Zioni Butao joins us from government in Malawi. She is the national focal person, and she is an active member of the national focal group. Zioni, you have the floor, my dear. Please, would you share with us very briefly some of the key success factors in establishing your national focal group? Why was it successful? And also, let's be honest, let's also highlight some of those challenges and the challenges going forward. Zioni, you're most welcome. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Indeed, I'm going to share the successes and challenges of the Malawi National Focal Group on Groundwater. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, I'll be first of all talking of the success factors for the Malawi National Focal Group on groundwater. These are some of the factors that led to the success of our National Focal Group. First of all, let me mention that in the establishment of this NFG, the first thing that was done was the mapping of institutions that are interested in groundwater in the country. So this was done in 2020 with OneWorld. So out of this, what happened is there was an outline of various institutions with a range of interests in groundwater. So 12 members, no, I haven't finished. Yeah. 12 members were selected to be in the steering committee. These members were actually selected from over 35 key institutions that were mapped. So the key issue, actually, for one of the key issues for the success is the choice of the chair, the co-chair, and the secretariat. We agreed that we are going to put government as chair of the focal group, being the policy, government looking at policy, but also being the key institution in terms of sustainable groundwater management in the country. So we said government is going to be chair. We chose co-chair and we chose secretariat. Among the institutions looking at the willingness, the activeness in the groundwater management sector, subsector, yeah, as well as actually the secretariat institution was picked because they did really indicate that they are very willing even to fund some of the functions or some of the activities that were going to be done in the NFG. So we said, that was good, that enthusiasm is what we wanted. So we picked them. And then the next activity that was done was the development of TORs, customized for Malawi. We had TORs from OneWorld, but we agreed that we are going to customize this for Malawi to tailor them to suit the Malawi situation. So we customized them and suited the Malawi situation. We had a training in 2020 and 2023 by SADC-GMI and OneWorld on how to sustain these, how to establish and sustain the NFGs. And some of the key things learned were resource mobilization, governance issues. So these were some of the issues that have helped to sustain the NFGs, the NFG in the country. And let me also mention that the NFG is involved in SADC-GMI sub-grant projects that are taking place even in the first phase of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Project in SADC member states. The NFG was involved in actually coming up with the concepts as well as the proposals, and then we picked with as an NFG we picked. They are also involved in the project monitoring. The NFG is also involved in dialogue. We do conduct some dialogue sessions. Of course, we do have a WhatsApp group, but apart from that, where we do conduct meetings. Most of the meetings are virtual ones. We have conducted a few physical ones. Let me indicate here, one of the key physical meetings that we did organize was attended by over 70 members, plus online participants. So this one was really successful. It was to do with accountability of developers when they're developing the groundwater. So this one, actually, it even involved the local stakeholders, the communities. So community members were also invited. Otherwise, we also do conduct virtual meetings. And the NFG is also involved in creating its awareness. There have been awareness creation activities in forums like the World Water Day conference in Malawi and the other forums. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so let me mention a few of the challenges that have been faced as in the implementation of the NFG. The key one has been actually the financial resources to hold regular meetings. Some organizations, we may say, okay, we want to conduct physical meetings, but you find that some other organizations are not able to attend the meeting because of issues of finances. So what we have done is we have been conducting virtual meetings, but then the issue is you realize that the virtual meetings are poorly attended. So what we are now exploring is we are trying to do resource mobilization from other sources. Like we are thinking of asking banks to fund us for physical meetings, and then at the end of the day we give them the floor to talk just a little on what they do, because we actually believe that physical meetings provide better networking opportunities in terms of individual networking as well as organizational networking. So we think this is still important. And SADC-GMI has not actually left us. We are currently planning to have a national stakeholder dialogue from 25th to 26th September 2024. So you can see that is soon. And this NSD, this dialogue is going to be funded by SADC-GMI, but of course we are going to look, we are in the process of sourcing other resources to beef that up. So we hope it will work. We are also thinking of, we are also planning to bring in more private stakeholder members, more private sector members, because we have, we noted that some of them are actually asking that you are doing this thing. Can we join? Can you know, something like that? Yeah. What is it that you are doing? They are showing interest in a way. So we want to bring them in as well. So the other challenge that was also noted is there's varied participation by different members of the steering committee. Let me mention here that the steering committee is actually composed of the government. It is composed of it is composed of the government. It is composed of NGOs. We looked at NGOs because they are also they are involved in resource mobilization, advocacy. Then also regulatory institution. We looked at regulation. We looked at the academia because they're involved in the higher learning as well as the research. Also the private sector as service providers. So it is really varied. There are varied. It's a varied interest in there. But then we think that we can also bring in even more members. We are actually looking to bring in local councils representatives where possible, even to include, to go further to the grassroots and include local chiefs or local leaders, because we want to go further to, you know, we believe these are near the ground where they benefit from the groundwater, where the needs for the groundwater are. So we are actually, in the moment, we have told ourselves that, okay, let's be flexible. Let's not be rigid. So in other words, we are trying to map again and then see who else is interested in, whoever is showing much interest, we are bringing them in. Because we have noted some are not very interested in the committee, in the NFG, while some are very interested. So we are trying to bring in as many members as possible. And we believe that as we are doing this, it's more like we are also learning. So from the lessons that we learn, we will improve our NFG, NFG membership, and as well as the activities that are done in the NFG. Thank you so much. That is the end of my presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Malawi. That was great. You shared your experience with us, some of the key factors and the stakeholders that you've identified, the support of SADC Groundwater Management Institute, and various involved, the diversity of stakeholders really stood out there. We're going to ask South Africa now to share their experience. The contexts are quite different in the two countries if you compare. So Zachariah Maswuma from the Department of Water and Sanitation, you are the national focal person. Please do share with us your experience from South Africa in establishing the national focal group, and in particular, the success factors and also some of those challenges.
Yeah, greetings and Chairperson and all colleagues and participants. Thank you so much for the opportunity And in South Africa, we are actually at an infant stage. Although we started with other countries, it has taken us for a long time to actually map out stakeholders and draw a process which we need to follow, taking into consideration the diversity of our country is quite big. There are a lot of stakeholders that need to participate. However, just to focus on the question that has been asked, what are the success factors? After mapping out the stakeholders, we approached our accounting officer just to seek approval. So the accounting officer granted the approval to establish the national focal group, because we have seen the opportunity in terms of implementation of a national groundwater strategy and the national water strategy 3, which the government has put up in place for ensuring that we implement the National Water Act properly. The National Water Source Strategy calls for creation of partnership in its implementation. So both the National Groundwater Strategy and the National Water Source Strategy, it was a consultative process when we come up with these two strategies, and a number of stakeholders in the sector participated. And this, we saw it as an opportunity to say, maybe perhaps let's have a different focal group that will look at the implementation of the two strategies. And most of the stakeholders have seen this as an opportunity, including our accounting officer. So we then therefore identified stakeholders that can provide effective support in this focal group. Like I've already indicated, the diversity of the country poses a lot of challenges. But we realized that maybe let's identify key stakeholders, which are mainly the government agencies, like the MISA, CSIR in South Africa, Water Research Commission, the Agri-SA, the INCOMATI, the CMA, the SANParks and Groundwater Division of Southern Africa. And then we also included the universities who are very much influential in the field of geohydrology. Some of them they've incorporated geohydrology as a field of study in their curriculum. So we mobilized all those stakeholders. It's not a closed process. So we are still mobilizing more stakeholders. One of the things that is very, very important is just to emphasize that the National Focal Group, when we establish it, the emphasis is to make sure that we implement our national groundwater strategies and other programs that will be initiated by SADC. But to make it of success, we saw the opportunity that the functions for the National Focal Group and the priority must align with the priority of the government strategies. Then that will actually assist us to implement our government strategies. Next slide. Just moving to the next slide. In terms of the support, we're getting support from the SADC-GMI, which is for the meeting, to attend the meetings and the workshops. And we are planning to do the formal establishment of this focal group, and we're hoping that SADC-GMI will provide financial support for the launching of this focal group. The focal group has already been trained, and we are looking forward to work very closely with them. In terms of the challenges, Chairperson, I'm trying to be fast. In terms of the challenges, the last slide. While the National Focal Group model is the best innovation, however, there's a need to develop measures to strengthen and encourage voluntary participation beyond the project phase. Like I've already indicated, that the way we have mapped out stakeholders, we've foreseen the challenges of bringing everyone to the focal group, because some of the stakeholders won't make it in terms of financial resources coming physically to the meetings. Some, they don't even have the resources, like you can do virtual meetings. But we remember those stakeholders that we see that they are capable of participating. They do have financial muscles to be able to participate, not to a larger extent. Obviously, they will need support because some of these stakeholders have been government agencies that are expected to generate revenue. So in terms of their participation, really they prioritize certain things. So yes, the model, we have seen it, it's a good model, but to encourage voluntary participation, there is a need to develop a strategy which will also help to attract donor funding to support the activities of the focal group. So that is what we are looking at after the launching, to make sure that the focal group can develop that kind of a model, which will align to our strategies as a government, like the implementation of the groundwater strategies and also the national water resource strategies, plus other programs like the sub-grant projects for the SADC-GMI, to make sure that they are being implemented in consultation with all the stakeholders, even those that we which are not listed here, like the water services authorities, community structures, which we find it very difficult to approach them if you don't have financial resources to support them to attend meetings and also to participate in the projects. Issues related to the hosting institution and secretariat, we haven't finalized that. Like I've already indicated, we have put a number of institutions here that has got the capability to host this focal point, host the focal group as a focal point instead of a government. We appreciate a situation where an institution can be a focal group supported by the government and getting support from the government and encouraging diverse stakeholders to participate. So we still have to work hard to make sure that we get that relevant institution that can host and another institution that can provide secretariat services. The last one there is about mobilization of resources. Is something that we're working on, and the current national focal group will work on the need to mobilize resources to ensure that we sustained our activities and promote advocacy, information, coordination, and support the works of the national focal group and the government in large. I think that's all in brief. These are just taking notes, but I will appreciate questions. I tried to summarize and to be on time. Thank you.
Indeed, you were on time. Thank you so much, South Africa. And you've shared with us a number of different snippets that are so key to, if you're talking about success factors. And I think the diversity of stakeholders, but the important role of government and that alignment with government strategy, and in terms of the challenges, how do you sustain the activity, the interest of this group, and actively promote groundwater resources, but you need to resource mobilize. We need investments. Malawi also mentioned the fact that they're bringing in the banks. This is tremendous to bring in that support. How are you going to mobilize the resources to sustain the activities of the NFG? And how do you sustain that? You're aligning with government and you're also resource mobilizing, and the NFG, the National Focal Group, needs to take this forward. So continue the activity of this very important group. We are joined now by Tanzania, the United Republic of Tanzania. We've heard from Malawi and South Africa. Let's hear from one more. By the way, there have been 10 national focal groups established. So Tanzania, Madam Mwanomku Mwanyika joins us also from government, from the water department. She's a geohydrologist. Madam Wanomku, I know you don't have slides for us, but you have some very wise words of wisdom to share with us in terms of what your success factors were in Tanzania. And I think you are more recently established. What are some of those success factors in the establishment of the NFG? And what were some of your challenges? And what do you see as the challenges going forward? You've heard from Malawi and South Africa. Let's now share Tanzania's experience. You have the floor, Mwanamko.
Thank you so much, Ruth and colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me, though I'm not sure if you can see me. My camera is not good enough. So
We can hear you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. So as Ruth introduced me, my name is Now you can see me, I think.
We can see you, yes. Please proceed.
So my name is Mwanamkuu Monica. I'm a principal hydrogeologist working with the Ministry of Water based in Dodoma. So as Ruth said, I'm going to present on the benefits and challenges for the establishment of the National Focal Group, specifically in Tanzania. So unlike other few countries, Tanzania do not have a specific department or section which deals with groundwater management issues. The management of groundwater and surface water is managed by the Department of Water Resources. And as you might be aware, Tanzania is blessed with a lot of surface waters. We have lakes, we have rivers, we have dams. Although the quantity of these surface waters has been declining and making the demand for groundwater to rise. So most of the region, especially in the central part of Tanzania, this includes the capital city of Dodoma and other regions like Singida and other regions currently are using the groundwater. So due to the increasing demand of groundwater in the country, now the government has started to concentrate in the management of groundwater management and development. So as you might be aware, the management of groundwater requires different expertise, more knowledge, but it also requires joint efforts between different stakeholders. So this innovative idea of establishing the National Focal Group brought by the SADC-GMI is highly accepted in the United Republic of Tanzania. We are now in the process of establishing our National Focal Group. We have already prepared the terms of reference and we have discussed this as a group. The other benefit, we have prepared the resource mobilization strategy, of that document. But we are in the process of registering our National Focal Group, and we have decided to register it as a national as an NGO. So the National Focal Group in Tanzania comprises different stakeholders. Others are coming from the government institutions. Others are coming from private sectors. We have representatives from many institutions, as well as the non-governmental organizations. So the major role of the National Focal Group is to do resource mobilization to implement the groundwater projects in Tanzania, but also to support the governments in terms of technical expertise, technical groundwater expertise. So another is innovative idea is the establishment of the Groundwater National Stakeholders Dialogue. This dialogue has been established by the National Focal Group. So we are going to have the first national stakeholders, the Groundwater National Stakeholders Dialogue this year in October 2nd and 3rd, where we are going to discuss different issues on groundwater of the country and general ones. So in terms of the challenges, we have one major challenge for coordinating or managing the national focal group, and this is inadequate resources to conduct meetings. But we are still mobilizing resources to see if we can address this one. So another benefit of establishing the national stakeholders dialogue is that the NFG is that the NFG group has attracted more stakeholders, more partners, including the private sectors, where we are going to work with them in addressing the challenges of the groundwater management. Thank you.
Ruth,
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much. I was struggling with my buttons. Thank you so much, Tanzania. And I picked up, you know, many of the member states of the three. Resource mobilization comes up as a big issue in sustaining the activities of the National Focal Group. But lots of purpose and benefit and reason and ownership that's there. Thank you so much, countries, for sharing your NFG experiences. Belinda, I'm going to come over to you now. Belinda Petrie joins us from OneWorld. She's a water governance and finance expert. And OneWorld was, in fact, a key partner to SADC Groundwater in supporting this regional process on establishing the national focal groups. Belinda, you have a particular view or set of views, having been so intimately involved. What do you feel, having listened now to the countries that have shared their experiences? What do you believe are some of those necessary conditions for the successful groundwater governance models? I'm also going to ask you, because I know that you work at local, national, basin, international basin or aquifer level, as well as the broader SADC region and continental, in fact, give us your view, please, on the role that transboundary water institutions, river basin organizations, what role do they have, perhaps in this, as we strive to get good groundwater governance? So share with us, please, the necessary conditions for good groundwater governance, and then also touch on the basin, the shared river basins and aquifers, those institutions. Belinda, you have the floor. Thank you.
Ruth, thank you. But first, just to say thank you very much to Malawi, Tanzania, and South Africa for some great presentations. Ruth, you asked for honesty, and I think we got it. And also James, not only for your presentation, but to SADC-GMI for initiating this amazing initiative. I think it's been an immense achievement to get to 10 member states, which is a critical mass in South Africa, in Southern Africa, of these national focal groups established at different levels. So I will talk about the necessary conditions for success, as well as the transboundary relevance. And Hilary, next slide, please. But just to start by saying that it's absolutely necessary that we overcome the challenges that the different member states today have outlined. And it's also essential that we optimize the successes that each of the member states has talked about, and even those that are more in infancy, like South Africa vis-a-vis Malawi, which is relatively further established. It's critical that we do this. I think most of us understand why, but I'll touch on that again as I go through this. So the necessary conditions of success, what has to be in place? And yes, Ruth, this is drawn from our collective experience of working with SADC-GMI since 2020, those good old days of COVID. in facilitating the establishment of NFGs. So I think first and foremost, water security, which is a challenge in the region, is driven by climate change, water demand patterns, and by governance. And governance is the key enabler or disabler of success. So good governance is the uppermost critical condition of success. And there are a number of aspects that come with that. First is that all water resources fall from a water security perspective, increasing demand, and because of climate change, must be managed both conjunctively and sustainably for optimal development outcomes. And those development outcomes, and this is where groundwater is critical, is food security, health, drinking water, sustainable livelihoods. And because we've got a range of sectors and different groups of stakeholders, municipalities, households, farmers, etc., that are dependent on the resource, we really do rely on inclusivity and integration in our governance arrangements. And I think you've heard both successes and challenges from the different countries, is that both of these are critical, but can be challenging. And there have been, I think, the need to just keep at it, keep the momentum going, keep bringing in the different types of stakeholders and the different sectors, as well as different levels of governance, representation of communities and households as much as of private sector, bigger private sector business, governments, etc., is absolutely critical. And so integrated water resource management and the principles of IWRM is a central and necessary condition of success, because it promotes inclusivity and integration, and as well as cross-sectoral approaches. That nexus approach, cross-sectoral approach, water, energy, food, ecosystem nexus, and I think underpins innovative governance. I think this has been, for me, it's having that sort of more helicopter view, having watched and supported most of the member states' development of their NFG models. That nexus approach is critical. And it's not least because we need to start with a landscape or catchment level approach, which is also why the transboundary aspect that I'll come to just now is critical. Ecosystems and an ecosystem as a whole, and in this instance, one of the many, the whole is definitely greater than the sum of the parts. Are essential for supporting ecological and grey infrastructure that our groundwater development needs, that our conjunctive use with surface water needs, and also in order to manage the increasing onset of climate change. Investment is another necessary, investment is another necessary condition, but this won't happen. And I think we've seen this throughout this NFG process and beyond, is that it won't happen without innovation, both in terms of financing and different financing mechanisms, blended finance, for example, and bringing in different stakeholders. A couple of our member states today have spoken about private sector engagement. Innovative approaches are needed to get the private sector on board, and I think everyone's learned that. But we also need innovation in our governance arrangements, which is why we are here today, and particularly in our institutional arrangements. And as James said earlier, that's exactly what we are talking about. So investment, innovation, and institutions are other or additional critical conditions of success. And colleagues, I would say that sustainable governments plus finance, so this is an equation, is what leads us to sustainable water resources, which is what we need to circle back to the first point in terms of water security that is driven by climate change, demand patterns, and governance. And so to address all of those necessary conditions, and I've outlined 3 key areas, plus the water security condition. Our governance arrangements need to be structured for those. And this is how the NFG model was actually conceptualized. The NFG model was conceptualized to address the multiple, multifaceted, multi-level challenges and opportunities for innovative groundwater governance in conjunction with surface water. And we've seen this play out in the NFG rollout across the countries. So the composition of the NFGs must be able to include all the relevant institutions. It must enable investments. In other words, so South Africa was talking about the challenge of a host institution, for example. It's critical to have the right host institution to be able to attract investments, because in the end, funders want to see that the money is getting channeled through a legitimate bank account, and there's ability to manage the finance and disperse it. And often the host institutions do this. So this is among the critical elements of the NFG. The transboundary context is critical, not least because so much of our water in Southern Africa and elsewhere does not follow administrative and political boundaries. Integrated sustainable development is key. Investment competency is key. You have to have that in your NFGs. The ability to translate information, data, etc., for communities, households, and policy decision makers, investors, etc., is also key. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit more about the transboundary relevance in my last couple of minutes. So it's interesting, and I think the conundrum with transboundary and water and groundwater in particular is that groundwater dependence is often very local. I mean, you see this playing out at household farmer level, and often increasingly more at an urban level, because infrastructure is failing us. And investments in infrastructure or the maintenance of that is failing us. And so the groundwater dependence increases, but is very local. But, and this is where the conundrum comes in, our water systems don't follow administrative boundaries, and that's both our surface water, which is often more obvious. It's much easier to see, you know, the rivers and lakes, which has been, until recently, the focus of transboundary water management has been on rivers and lakes, which is surface water. But our transboundary aquifers and the groundwater that flows through those also do not always follow administrative boundaries. And there's been work done around the world and in the region on mapping what where those transboundary aquifers are. And I think to date, there are more than 600 that have been identified, but the identification process is ongoing. So it is critical. Transboundary cooperative governance and management for transboundary aquifers does matter. And for that reason, the river basin organizations, which are well established in many parts of Southern Africa, are paying increasing attention to the conjunctive use of ground and surface water. And SADC-GMI is supporting and working with a number of these river basin organizations, and I mention a couple here. Limpopo Watercourse Commission, they've established a groundwater committee and developing a groundwater strategy. And so it makes sense that the NFGs in the member states concerned are working together with the RBOs to have a look at the transboundary aspects as well as the local aspects. Erasicom, I think SADC-GMI is working with them on the Stumpret transboundary aquifer system, and there's also ongoing work with others like Bopusacom. So it is critical that RBOs work with the NFGs. The NFGs, I know that you've got successes and you've got challenges you're trying to overcome, but looking forward to you playing more of a role in promoting the transboundary relevance of groundwater. And Ruth, I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Belinda. Some key messages there and lessons for us going forward. We have 10 minutes left. I'll take 1 minute to wrap up the discussion, but let's throw it open to the floor. We have a number of participants in the room, and I see I've noted 2 questions in the chat, and any one of the panelists, if you're keen on contributing to the answer. James, Belinda, Zioni, Zachariah, and Wanumku. If you would like to share with the audience here how, first of all, the first question was relating to have the NFGs managed to identify real projects that possibly the private sector, like Coca-Cola or the banks, could get involved in? There is another question, and if I don't see that you're going to answer the question, I'm going to pounce on you and ask you. The second question that we've been asked in the chat is how do we make sure that the end users, the local stakeholders that are directly impacted by groundwater, that depend on groundwater, how do we make sure they're involved in the processes and in the projects so that it doesn't come as any top-down? And I think if that could be emphasized by one of the countries that were on the panel, that would be great. Zioni, Zachariah, and Mwanamku, is there anything you would like to contribute in addressing those questions? Inclusivity of end users, making sure that they are involved in the structures, decisions, and projects, and then private sector, some of those companies like Coca-Cola. Are there projects in your country that you could possibly get the private sector to support? You can just put your camera on. Okay, Zioni, thank you very much. You've unmuted. Please take a stab at that, Zioni.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Indeed, in Malawi, I would say that even during the time we were being of the establishment of the NFG, during the training, one of the things actually that we were taught was to come up with proposal, concept and proposal. So I remember we did come up with a proposal. It was like a follow-up as NFG. It was a follow-up on the conjunctive water management in the Shire River Basin. This one, actually, let me say that we did not send it to any private companies, whatever, but SADC-GMI, in a way, they have responded to it, because now we have a project in the Shire River Basin. It's called the Shire River Basin Groundwater Study. And actually, the aspects that were put in there, they are the ones that are going, because there are things to look at the study modeling, things to look at managed aquifer recharge and so on. So what the project is doing is similar to that. So we are glad for that. In fact, let me say that a number of things SADC-GMI is actually picking up. We had a proposal on the managed aquifer recharge in hydrogeologically difficult areas in Malawi. So this one is a pilot. It is being done in the central region of Malawi in 2 districts. It is yet to start. It will start almost soon, but SADC-GMI has also picked that one. But suffice, in fact, these are just some of the projects that I've mentioned. Suffice to say that although SADC-GMI has picked up these ones, we also have other areas. For example, managed aquifer recharge. We would also want to do it. We may not have written the proposals, like the full proposals yet, but we also want to do it, like, for example, in other areas, in the south, in the north, like in Zimba district, where we also want to study and see the results that we get there. So it's like we have some projects at the moment. We can upscale these initiatives that are being done by SADC-GMI. Even groundwater monitoring, we have a project that is running at the moment. It's being financed by SADC-GMI. It's on revitalization of our groundwater monitoring network in the southern region. It's mainly in the Shire River Basin and in the Lake Chilwa Basin. But that one, as you can see, is being done in the southern region. The other region, central and northern region, our groundwater network is not in a very good shape as well. So if private sector can come in, we would welcome that as well. we already actually have some concepts but we have not yet sent them out. So I'll just put it at that we do have some concepts. We can who the funder, whoever funder we identify, I think, let me put it at that. In terms of there was another question, at what stage does the NFG bring in the general public? I want to say that since I've talked of the NFG being involved in these sub-grant projects, usually like for the groundwater monitoring, that was project that is running now, there was sensitization that was actually specifically done. It was done to the local councils. It was done with the local councils, then the sensitization went to the grassroots, so that wherever the monitoring wells are being revitalized, the people should be aware of whatever is happening. So I would say this at that stage we sensitize them so that they are not surprised with the project when it comes in. But we are also planning to, when the equipment is installed, we are planning that they should also be informed now the importance of the equipment and how they should own it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zione, and you've demonstrated in your responses on those questions, you've demonstrated the important role of the multi-stakeholder engagement, the multi-levels of engagement, the role of the NFG in resource mobilization, developing concept notes, and the mandate, working very closely with the mandated institutions at local and national level. Belinda, your hand is up, and we have basically 2 minutes.
I'm going to be very quick. I just wanted to thank the person that raised the question, Pamelo, on bringing in the general public, which Zione did comment on. You know, just some experiences, for example, Ruth, the project we also did with you on the Table Mountain Aquifer system, the need for community engagement, community data, citizen science. We saw this across the region, also in the Limpopo groundwater strategy, is absolutely critical. And I just wanted to encourage anyone that's working in groundwater governance to think very hard about bringing in that stakeholder group, not only for decision making, but also in ongoing data management and collection. Thanks.
Thank you, Belinda, and thank you to everyone. I'm appreciative of you mentioning the Table Mountain Water Source Partnership, because it also gives me a chance to maybe add some information to the question on the private sector engagement, because in that particular case of the Table Mountain Water Source Partnership, and that focused on groundwater, and I noticed some names in the room here who were involved in that initiative, really looking at private sector support in that resource, and the Table Mountain Water Source Partnership really was a collective. So that is a very localized partnership, working at the local level with local stakeholders and managing very successfully to bring in the private sector to fund these local level water resource protection initiatives. Good people, we have 1 minute left, and I think what's left for me to do is just to thank you for being here in the room, thank the speakers and the panelists for sharing their knowledge with all of you, and really just to say that it is so critically important that we invest in our institutions, in our information, in our infrastructure, and let's not forget that we need built infrastructure, but also let's make nature work for us, and let's use and protect that ecological infrastructure, the aquifers themselves, we need to invest in. So thank you so much. I see that the time is up. I hope you can see how we are building bridges through these multi-stakeholder platforms, vertically and horizontally, and that we continue to invest in our groundwater in all components of all those eyes that James highlighted there for you. So thank you very much. Have a great day. And we really do appreciate your participation in this session. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.